Well, hello everyone and welcome back to our video lessons on the topic of excretion. I'm going to start by asking you to think back on the last time that you peed in the toilet. I know it's not kind of the best way to start the day or the video, but think about it. And as you let the liquid leave your system, did you have a look at the color of the stream of urine that came out? Now, one of the fascinating things about our urine is that it comes in many shades of yellow, and it's an interesting thing to observe. And the question it brings up is, why does the color of your urine vary? Now, for some of you probably have some idea already, something to do with the amount of water you drink, blah blah blah. And indeed, it is something to do about the amount of body that you've had, how hydrated you are. You'll sometimes see these charts when I was in the army. I saw these charts put up in the toilet. They'll be staring you in the face while you're doing your small business. And it is there to tell you if your pee is a certain color that you should be very worried and you should be drinking more water. And the thing that we should take away from this is that the body regulates and controls the concentration of urine based on how much water there is in your body. And this is an example of what we call osmoregulation. Now, osmo, as we'll see later, has something to do with osmosis, osmotic pressure, and regulation is about, keeping it under control. So in this video, we'll be looking at what is osmoregulation, and also we'll look at this hormone called antidiuretic hormone, which has a role in osmoregulation. And we'll see what it does in the body and how it works. On the textbook pages, there's just two of them, so have a read of that as well. So what is osmoregulation? There's a lot of words, but let's break it down. Now, osmoregulation is the control of water and solute concentration levels in the blood. And the blood has all the different components. And one of the components of blood is plasma. Plasma is mostly water and dissolved substances like all your solutes. And osmoregulation is controlling the level of water and solute in your blood, in particular your blood plasma. And the aim of osmoregulation is to maintain a constant water potential in the body. From our topic on osmosis, you should remember or recall that the water potential of blood depends on the amount of water and also the amount of mineral salts in the plasma. Right? The greater the amount of water, the greater the water potential. The greater the amount of mineral salts, the lower the water potential. So osmoregulation is trying to keep your blood having a constant water potential. And this is a form of homeostasis. And you'll see this more in the next topic. Homeostasis is basically trying to keep and control the levels of different things in the body to maintain a constant internal environment in the body. So we'll take a look at this more in the next topic. But first, we will be focusing for the rest of this video on osmoregulation. So why is osmoregulation important? Now, to answer this question, let's think about what happens if the water potential of your blood becomes too high. Now, I put here blood plasma / tissue fluid. Why is that? Well, it's because hopefully you can remember that in your capillaries, the tissue fluid is partly formed out of the plasma, right? It's formed out of the plasma moving out of the capillaries to form tissue fluid. So the water potential of the blood plasma is also the water potential of the tissue fluid. Now, what happens if that becomes too high? Let's say after you drank a lot of water. Think back to your osmosis topic. What would happen to your cells? And hopefully you recall that if the water potential of the blood is too high, then it might cause your blood and tissue cells to swell and burst, right? Because water would move in by osmosis, causing your cells to burst. Now, on the flip side, what happens if the water potential of your blood plasma and tissue fluid is too low? Right? So let's say you've gone for a really tiring exercise, you sweated out lots of water, and now there's less water in your blood plasma. So the water potential has dropped. Now, what might happen to your cells? Hopefully you can remember from the topic of osmosis that your cells will become dehydrated, they will shrink, and in the case of red blood cells, we say that they will crenate. So either way, it is not good for the water potential of your blood plasma to be too high, nor is it good for it to be too low. So your body tries to keep the water potential within a very narrow range, and that is osmoregulation. Now we saw in the previous video that the kidney plays an important role in excretion, right, in filtering the blood and in producing urine. Now because of that role, the kidney is also an important osmoregulator. So the kidney has a role to play in regulating and controlling the concentration of solutes and the water potential of the blood. And that's because the kidneys are the target organ of a hormone called antidiuretic hormone. So this antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, is produced by a certain part of the brain. Okay, let me draw my best brain. ADH is produced by a certain part of the brain. ADH is transported to the kidneys through the bloodstream, and it acts on the kidney and changes its function slightly. Now what does ADH do? ADH controls the volume of water that is reabsorbed by the kidney nephrons, or the kidney tubules. Right? It controls the amount of water that the nephrons will reabsorb. So for example, the more ADH there is, the more water will be absorbed back into the blood, selective reabsorption, and therefore the more concentrated the urine. So more ADH means that more water will be selectively reabsorbed during selective reabsorption, and leaving behind urine that is more concentrated. Now that is why ADH is called antidiuretic hormone. If you go and look up this word diuretic, diuretic means basically pee very often. Okay? So if a person is having this diuretic condition, it means he needs to go to the toilet very often to pee. So antidiuretic means it prevents you from peeing very much. Right? So it makes sense. The more ADH, the more water is reabsorbed into your blood, and the more concentrated your urine. So you have to pee less often, right? Because there's more water being reabsorbed. So it's antidiuretic. Right? Try to get your head around that. Okay, so what exactly is antidiuretic hormone? Well, it is a protein that acts as a chemical signal. Right? That's what a hormone is. It is a protein that acts as a chemical signal. Right? It is produced by a region of the brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus produces it and stores it in this little pocket here, part of the brain sticking out, called the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. Right, so the hypothalamus produces it, and the pituitary gland stores it. And when needed, ADH is secreted by the pituitary gland and transported in the bloodstream, right, to the kidneys. Now later we'll see that all hormones, usually hormones, are transported in the bloodstream and they act on a certain target organ. So in this case, ADH, transported in the bloodstream, acts on the kidneys. Now let's take a closer look at what happens under different situations. Alright, so how does osmoregulation work? Well, remember that osmoregulation means maintaining a constant water potential in the blood, right? So there's a normal water potential of the blood, right? Normally, there's kind of a normal water potential that your body is happy to have, right? And osmoregulation tries to maintain the water potential at that normal level. However, sometimes there is a stimulus or change that might cause a decrease in water potential. For instance, you might have gone for exercise, you sweat a lot, so you have less water left in your blood. So that's called a stimulus, right? It's something that causes change. A stimulus decreases the water potential of your blood. What happens? Well, the stimulus is detected by a receptor. And in this case, the receptors are found in the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus detects, oh no, there's a decrease in water potential. And once the hypothalamus detects that, right, it triggers off a corrective mechanism. This corrective mechanism is going to correct it. Okay, so there was a decrease in water potential, and the corrective mechanism is going to correct that. It's going to bring the water potential back to normal. So what exactly is the corrective mechanism? Let's take a closer look. So in this case, there was a decrease in water potential. Your body has lost a lot of water. Now I want you to think for a while, pause the video, think for a while. If the body has less water, the water potential of the blood has decreased, then what should the body do to respond? Well, hopefully you said something like the kidney needs to reabsorb more water, right? The urine should be more concentrated. I need to lose less water because I've already lost a lot of water. And that's exactly what happened. So you can see point 4 here. Eventually what we want is that we want to reabsorb more water in the kidneys. We want to produce a smaller volume of urine, and the urine must be more concentrated. So how does the hypothalamus do that? So again, the hypothalamus detects this decrease in water potential. Then it sends a signal to the pituitary gland to release more ADH. So more ADH is transported to the kidneys, and ADH acts on the collecting duct of the kidney. It acts on a very specific part of the kidney called the collecting duct. You must remember this. It acts on the collecting duct. It makes the collecting ducts more permeable to water. So now more water is going to be reabsorbed into the capillaries through the collecting ducts. So when more water is reabsorbed, the urine produced is less in volume and more concentrated, and the water potential of the blood will be increased and brought back to normal. So recall from the previous video on selective reabsorption that there was some water being reabsorbed at the collecting duct. Well, ADH acts on the collecting duct. If there's more ADH, the collecting duct becomes more permeable to water, so more water is reabsorbed. Right? If there's less ADH, then the collecting duct becomes less permeable to water and less water is reabsorbed. Okay, so let's turn to the other situation. Now imagine that, for some crazy reason, you're drinking a great load of water. And, what happens then? There's a stimulus. The water potential of your blood will increase. Right? Because you drank lots of water and there's lots of water in your system. Again, this stimulus is detected by a receptor. And the receptor is found in your hypothalamus. And once detected, the hypothalamus will start off a corrective mechanism to bring back things to normal. Okay, so what happens? The pituitary gland will now release less ADH. So it's kind of the opposite as just now. Right? So just now it was more ADH, now it's less ADH. Less ADH transported to the kidney. The walls of the collecting duct become less permeable to water. So less water is reabsorbed. If less water is reabsorbed, then more water remains in the urine, so more volume of urine is produced and the urine becomes more dilute. And because less water is reabsorbed, the water potential of the blood will decrease. And this will bring back the water potential to normal. Okay, so I think just take a bit of time to get your head around this. It's not very difficult. It's this idea of a loop, right? And we'll see more of this in homeostasis. It's a loop where things are normal, then there's a stimulus that causes a change, is detected by a receptor, and then there's a corrective mechanism to bring it back to normal. In this case, the corrective mechanism involves all this. So you also kind of need to know this and how to explain it. Okay, before we end, I would also like you to do some reading for yourself on this book, page of the textbook, and read about these two questions, right? How does the water potential of blood affect blood pressure? So is there a relationship between water potential of the blood and the blood pressure? And also, why is it that high salt diet is bad for you? I always say don't eat so much salty food. You should have a read of that. So let's end off by talking about something interesting. And that's osmoregulation in a single cell organism, like this paramecium here. Paramecium doesn't have any kidneys, right? Obviously, it's only one cell. However, water still moves into the cell by osmosis, right? Because the paramecium lives usually in fresh water, right? Where the water potential of the surroundings is quite high, so water will move into the cell. And the excess, so after a while, water will accumulate in the cell, and the cell needs to get rid of the excess water. So there's these organelles here called contractile vacuoles. They fill up with water, and then after a while, they'll splash it out. They'll spurt it and expel it out of the cell. Go look for a video on it, it's quite interesting. Okay, and let me leave you with a question to think about in your own time. So this comic is very cute, have a read of it. It just shows you that freshwater fish and saltwater fish face very different problems with osmoregulation. due to the different surroundings they live in. Right? Think about these questions and how they overcome it.